One day I'm downtown Atlanta, me and my friend, a guy by the name of KD, and we're under a bridge. And we're with the homeless gentleman, and we're interacting in dialogue, and I have some bread, and I'm giving him some bread. And so me and my wife, we do work with homeless a lot through our foundation. And so I'm there, and I'm interacting with this gentleman, and my phone rings. And so I pull it out, and I look at it, and it's a Connecticut area code. And I don't know anybody from Connecticut, and so I look at KD, and I say, I'll let it ring out. And KD says to me, you probably want to answer that. I said, I don't know anybody from Connecticut. He said, ESPN, duh. I said, well, I don't know anybody at ESPN. I said, but I'll give it a shot, and I answered it. And the guy said, Inky Johnson, Jose Morales, ESPN producer. I said, man, you on to something, okay? And the guy asked me, he said, is this really Inky Johnson? I said, yeah, last time I checked, I'm Inky Johnson. He said, is this the same guy that said if you could change what happened to you, you wouldn't? I said, I wouldn't change it for nothing in the world. He said, it's our understanding at ESPN that the game of football meant the world to you. I said, yeah, at one point it did. He said, what are you doing right now? I said, I'm under a bridge working with the homeless gentleman. He said, so you mean to tell me you're a projected first-round draft pick, and if you could be in the NFL right now making millions of dollars, you wouldn't change that? I said, I wouldn't change it for nothing in the world. He said, I'm coming to see you. I said, come on, I'm in Atlanta. He said, no, I don't want to see you in Atlanta. I want to see you on the exact yard line where you almost lost your life, and I want you to tell me that. I said, I'll meet you in Neyland. I meet him in Neyland Stadium. He walks in. He has the film crew to hang back, and he walks over to me, and he says to me, Inky, I want you to understand one thing. I'm not here because of your story. At ESPN, we see stories all the time. I said, cool, why are you here then? He said, I'm here because for the life of me and the guys that I work with, we can't understand your perspective. He said, we can't understand that something that so many people consider to be a tragedy and something that so many people consider to be opposition and something that so many people thought would break you because of what the game of football meant to you, you don't view it that way. And he said, I'm going through some personal problems on my own with my family. And he said, I just can't look at it with the perspective that you look at your situation with. And so can you please help me with some understanding of why you view life that way? And I told them, you probably would never view my situation the way I view it because you didn't go through it. I said, but personally, the reason I can tell you that I view my situation the way that I do because I believe I'm here with a purpose and a mission that's a lot greater than any adversity, opposition, or challenge. And so my perspective about it will always be different. You see, I like to ask people, I'm a straight shooter. And I like to ask people the question, what is it really about? Like when you cut through the fluff about what you want and what you're trying to accomplish, like at the core of it, what is it really about? Is it about something superficial, materialistic? Is it about a financial number? Well, what happens when you get it? Like at the core of it, what is it really about? And I work with a lot of athletes. I do a lot of professional work. I'm be with the Denver Broncos this Friday, and I ask guys all the time, like, man, what do you really want out of life? Some guys say, man, I want to be rich. I say, cool. I said, the true measure of being rich is how much would you be worth if you lost the money? Some people say, man, I want a house, I want a car. I say, cool. I'm not here to judge. But I really want you to search on what do you really want out of this thing called life. And my journey started for me when I was 7 years old, and I thought what I wanted was the NFL. I really felt with every fiber of my being, man, if I could just make it to the NFL. I grew up on the east side of Atlanta in Kirkwood, and now Kirkwood is a lot different than it is back when I grew up in Kirkwood. A lot different. They got a ping pong table at the park, right? Ain't had no ping pong table when I grew up. And I was coming up in this 2-bedroom home with 14 people. And I was sleeping on the floor. Me and my cousins, we made pallets every night, 3 sheets of cover. And I had this dream that, man, if I could just make it to the NFL, I could get my mother off of that double shift at Wendy's. Like, man, if I could make it to the NFL, me and my cousins, we won't have to miss meals some nights. If I could just make it to that NFL, man, everything will make sense. And every night, me and my cousins, we would be in the street playing ball, tackle football, getting after it in the street, bloody, scarred up. And one night, we're in the street playing, tackling each other, busting each other up. And we knew every night when the street lights came on, we had about 10 minutes before we had to go in the house. And this night, we getting after it, and a blue pickup truck comes down the street. I'll never forget it. And we back out of the way to let the car go by, and he pulls over to the curb, and Out of it gets the first white guy we had ever saw in our neighborhood at the time. And immediately, every drug dealer on the corner, they take off running. And my Uncle Bobo, who's doing 40 years at the federal penitentiary right now, looks at me and says, Ink, don't talk to him. God got to be the police. God just so happened to be the nicest guy in the world. If that same guy that got out of that truck called me today and said, Inky, I'm in California and I got a problem, I'm going to find the first flight out to California and we're going to handle that problem. He means that much to me. And he walks up in the middle of our game and he says, hey, man, would y'all like to play organized football? I said, man, I would love that, man. The street getting rough. Where you been, brother? Like, man, I love the game, but it's street. He said, go in the house and get your guardian. I ran in the house. My Uncle JJ had just married into the family. I said, hey, Uncle, will you please come and speak to this gentleman? My uncle said, sure. My uncle walked outside. The guy extended his hand. He said, hey, man, my name is Trey Hurst. He said, I don't even supposed to be over here. He said, I dropped the kid home 3 blocks up, just riding down to check out the neighborhood. He said, I run a league across town. I think if you bring the kids out, I think it'll be a great opportunity for them and it could really help them. My uncle said, sir, we greatly appreciate it, but we just don't have the money for anything like that. And he pointed at me because I was standing right in front of the coach, and he said, his mother said she's working a double shift at Wendy's. She definitely doesn't have it. And the coach said, I tell you what, if you bring him and the other 3 to the park, he pointed at my 3 younger cousins, you bring them to the park tomorrow, he said, I'll pay for it. Next day, my uncle brought us to the park. I stood there in line, and I watched this guy that I didn't know from Adam take cash out of his own pocket, and he paid for me and my 3 younger cousins to play ball, and in my family, the only people that went to college was me and my 3 younger cousins that he paid for in that street that day. But I wanted to understand the man behind the actions. Because where I came from, people didn't operate like that. Like most of the time, it's a catch-22. Like it's very rare that people do things and it's just pure, right? And it's just who they are, and it's their essence. And so one night when he took me home, I got out and I'm standing on the sidewalk, and my house was 125 Warren Street. And I'm standing on the sidewalk in front of my house, and I said, Coach, can I ask you a question? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. And he gets out of his truck, he walks around face to face, and he said, what you got, Ink? I said, Coach, why do you do what you do? I said, because you don't just do it for me, you do it for any kid you meet that's in need. Like, this is just who you are. Like, I've watched you, I've studied you. Why do you really do what you do, and why do you live your life that way? And he said to me, he said, son, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you to ever forget it. And it was so simple, but yet so profound. And he said, son, as long as you make sure that somebody else's life is okay, he said, your life will always be okay. And he got out in his truck and he left. And it shaped the trajectory of my life, because the way I processed it was, Ink, as long as what you do and what you're connected to serves a greater purpose than just yourself, son, you will always trample the opposition. You will always trample the adversity. You will always trample the challenges of life. When people look at you and say, why do you view it the way that you do? I view it the way that I do because I understand the mission and the purpose that's attached to it. I'm here because I understand this one thing. Everybody I meet is fighting a battle that I know nothing about, and I don't have to change their life. I don't believe I'm that self-righteous, but if I could just leave them a little bit different and make them think why I respond and why I live my life the way that I do, my job is done.